The iMore Show is brought to you today by lynda.com, an easy, affordable way to help you learn, instantly stream thousands of courses created by experts on software, web development, photography, graphic design, and so much more. If you want to learn something on the internet, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your brain, you owe it to those who will experience what you learn to do it at lynda.com. And we've worked out a great deal for you. You can get access to all the courses for 7 days for free. All you have to do is visit lynda.com/iMore. That's lynda.com/iMore. Try lynda.com free for 7 days. Your brain will thank you. It is it is not December. It is November 10, 2014. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to be talking about continuity. We're going to talk about the new iMac, the new Mac Mini, and everything in the world of iPhones, iPads, Macs, and Apple. This is the iMore Show. Joining me today, we have the lovely and talented Peter Cohen. How are you, Peter?
I'm fine, Rene. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you, except this whole daylight savings time, the daylight standard time thing is total BS.
I completely agree with you. This dark by 4:30 thing is just totally unacceptable, and I wish to write a sternly worded letter of complaint to someone.
I was incredibly tired on Sunday, so I came home around 3 o'clock. I fell asleep. I woke up. It was pitch dark. I thought it was 2 in the morning, and I'd ruined my sleep schedule. It was like 4 p.m.
Still a little, mid-afternoon nap is not a bad thing.
Also joining us, we have the equally lovely and even more talented, well, I don't know, even more lovely and equally, we have the very lovely and talented Serenity Caldwell. How are you, Serenity?
Hi, Renee. I'm doing all right. I am also a little bit, can you call it jet lagged if it's not actually because of a jet?
Planet lagged.
I'm planet lagged. I'm farmer lagged. Thanks, daylight savings times.
I don't know what to do about it, and I can't change. I just wish we would settle on one and just stay there. We're no longer the agrarian culture that in days of old required us to work the farm under actual daylight. Now we have Philips Hue. I can make it any time of day or night I want.
Yeah.
We could always move to one of those locations that are outside the space-time continuum, like Indiana or Arizona.
Yeah, but then you'd have to live in Arizona.
Yeah, good point.
Sorry, Arizonians. Your state's perfectly nice. It's just not someplace I want to live.
It's a dry heat.
Yes.
All right. So, Peter, you got your hands on the brand new Mac Mini, and you did a review, and I think you liked it.
I did indeed. Now, the Mac Mini that I reviewed was the high-end Mac Mini, the $1,000 model. It's got a 2.8 gigahertz processor and a Fusion drive. Very well equipped for a nice little machine, and it was a lot of fun to use, absolutely.
But you've sent that back to Apple now?
Yes, unfortunately. Our time was brief, but very sweet. We'll always have Paris.
It was a flame that burned too brightly.
Exactly.
And you're going to test out the low-end model now?
Yes, that's right. Now I've got the 1.4 gigahertz model, the entry-level $499 model, and I'm going to be putting that through its paces. That one I'm actually keeping, so that one's going to be something that I'm going to do a long-term review of and try to figure out what the best applications are.
Away from the Mac Mini, what was your bottom line?
Well, I certainly think that the Mac Mini is an overall improvement over where it was in 2012. A lot of people have made, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but there is an internet echo chamber out there of people who have been complaining about 2 points with the refreshed Mac Mini. One is that it doesn't have a quad-core processor option anymore, and the other is that it doesn't have user upgradable memory anymore. And I understand and I sympathize with both these issues, but I think for a very large swath of the potential customer for the Mac Mini, these are not big issues. I certainly understand the use case, that's driving the complaints in both cases, but from my perspective, the Mac Mini is a great entry-level Mac for somebody who's new to the platform, or maybe somebody who has really old Mac hardware and they're upgrading and they're on a tight budget, and they just don't have the money for a new iMac, let's say, or a new MacBook Pro with Retina display, or a new MacBook Air. And they want the new Mac experience. They want to be able to run all the software that that is available now and enjoy things like continuity, but they don't necessarily have a big budget to work with. From that perspective, the Mac Mini is a great machine. The lack of user upgradable RAM is kind of a sticking point with me, simply because it means that you have to order from the factory with the amount of RAM that you want now. So there's no way to save yourself a few bucks and go third party on the RAM like there used to be. It's actually soldered to the motherboard. That puts a little bit more money in Apple's pocket and helps pad Apple's margins a little bit, but it does not bode well for users who are looking for an upgradable machine on their own. The quad-core processor thing, that's more of an inside baseball thing. The IT people who are using these for servers are a little bit put out by that because a lot of server applications are heavily optimized with multi-threading and hyper-threading, so the more cores, the better. But for the average user, a lot of that does not translate into something that's really that big a deal. So for them, they're going to see a performance improvement with especially the 2.6 and 2.8 gigahertz. 1.4 gigahertz model priced at $499 resets the Mac Mini back to the price where it was when the system was first released 9 years ago in 2005. And that's great to see Apple get that price down a little bit, especially to give the Mac the Mac Mini a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more space between itself and the 11-inch MacBook Air. Good move to see, and we'll be seeing in the weeks to come how good a machine it actually is.
Yeah, I've got two takeaways. I'm actually curious what you think, Ren, but my two takeaways is one camp of appliance computing. They no longer want to make stuff that you can dig into and change around. They want to give you a sealed box and not let you worry about maintaining it. And second, I want one even though I have absolutely no need for it.
Well, it's when you drop the price of a computer below a certain threshold, it becomes one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, I can totally afford one. I have so many uses for it. I mean, I had a Mac Mini in college and I really liked it, and I don't need one right now, but it definitely is a like I could use that as a media server. It would be so much fun.
That's the beauty of the Mac Mini right there, is that it's a really versatile machine. It's a great general purpose machine. It'd be a good machine in the office, a good machine at home. My kids each have Mac Minis of different generations. They love them. But it's also a good home theater PC. It's got an HDMI connector built into it that'll actually drive a 4K display at 24 or 30 hertz. So you can use it to display 4K content if you want to for a TV. And it's also the last Mac that's got an IR port, an infrared port on the front of it, so you can use it with an Apple TV remote if you want, which is kind of nice. Even though we're years beyond front row, you can install XBMC or another media server application if you really want the full home theater experience. But it's a versatile little machine that can do a lot of different things very well.
I still miss Front Row. I used to use Front Row a lot. I wish they would just make the Apple TV a new version of Front Row.
Indeed. I've gotten a few questions about the Mac Mini from folks on Twitter and other social media. And let me just pop a couple of questions that I've gotten right off the top of my head so people get good answers for them. One fellow was asking whether this would be a good machine to use for Xcode, and my answer to that is as good a machine as, let's say, a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air would be. And that is to say, lots of developers use them. Some developers prefer to go the multi-core approach and go with, real blazing fast iMac or even the Mac Pro, and that's fine. But if a person was asking whether or not this would be a good machine to use with Final Cut Pro and with Pro Tools, and my answer to that is absolutely not. No. Final Cut Pro is very hard on the GPU. This uses an integrated graphics processor, and you would really see a lot of benefit by going with a machine that has a discrete GPU for that, whether it's a 15-inch MacBook Pro or one of the mid-range or high-end iMacs, or even the Mac Pro. Those would all be better machines to use for that. Pro Tools, on the other hand, Pro Tools doesn't hit the GPU too hard, but it really hits memory very hard, RAM very hard. With 16 gigs of RAM, you're going to be hitting a ceiling pretty quick, especially if you get into pretty serious multi-track recording and mastering. So that would be another thing where I would be thinking about a machine that has more expandable memory. The 27-inch iMac, for example, can be taken up to 32 gigs. The Mac Pro can be taken even further than that. Those would be better candidates for a Pro Tools rig than this would. But if you're just using it for general purpose stuff, if you plan to use it with the software that comes on the Mac Mini, or even a lot of stuff that you can download from the Mac App Store and elsewhere, you should be just fine.
Yeah, speaking of the iMac, Peter very kindly gave me a huge helping hand with the iMac 27-inch Retina 5K review. I don't have too much to add over what I've said previously. That screen is just ridiculous. Some of the questions we've got is, are we sure it's 60 hertz? Yes, we're sure it's 60 hertz. Apple basically took two DisplayPort 1.2 pipes, fused them internally with a custom timing controller, and that lets them break all the rules when it comes to DisplayPort and Thunderbolt cables because they're not external. They're not being exposed, so they can, laugh in the face of the standards, and it produces great images. I was playing Arkham Asylum. I put it up at 5K, Peter, and at the low end I was getting 10 frames per second. At the high end, though, I was getting 29, 30 frames per second. It's not perfect, but it's at 5K. And when I dropped it down to 2.5K, the old standard iMac resolution, I was getting between 30 and 70 or 80 frames per second, which was just ridiculous. It was an impressive. We did get a couple of questions. I'm curious for your opinion on this, Peter. Some people are worried that it's too hot internally, especially the GPU. I haven't found that to be the case, and I've been running it pretty hard.
Well, Apple does make this equipment to be self-regulating. So if it gets warm, it will slow down, or under really difficult circumstances, if it gets too hot, it just won't work. The Mac will shut itself down. If that's the case, then you by all means should bring the thing into an Apple store or an authorized Apple service provider near you and let them know, because there's probably something wrong. I am of two minds about this. Things run hot when you start doing really intense things with them. If you start running apps that hit the GPU and the CPU really hard, that's going to generate
handbrake.
Exactly. If you're, especially apps like Handbrake that really will exercise as many cores as your machine has. And games, obviously, games are another one that really kind of push the envelope on performance. That stuff is going to make the machine run hot. It doesn't matter what kind of Mac it is. But I don't think that there's anything about the way that the Retina iMac is designed that will make it run any hotter per se than any other Mac will. I could be wrong on this, though.
We recorded the second episode of the Don Melton podcast over the weekend, and Don and I both got our new iMacs at the same time and had similar experiences with them. So you can tune into that if you want to hear a crusty old sailor's version of the review. The one thing we both noticed, and I don't know if anyone else has noticed that, if you guys have, but when you're setting up a new Mac these days, there seems to be some sort of bug with iOS 8.1 and Yosemite where it just starts freezing when you try to hit iCloud. Like when you do the setup procedure, either iCloud Drive or iCloud Keychain can just freeze you, and you'll have to restart, create a second account, finish setting up that one, then go back and delete the other one. Or when you try to log into iMessage or FaceTime or iCloud, it can just beach ball interminably. I'm not sure what that's about.
Yeah, I haven't run into that, although I will say that in general I've found iCloud Drive incredibly buggy, no matter what device I'm accessing it on. Even accessing it on iOS will crash for me half the time.
It's interesting you should say that, Rene, because when I was setting up the Mac Mini, I did notice that it took a long time to register my iCloud credentials. I didn't turn iCloud Drive on that, so I don't think it's an iCloud Drive issue specifically, but there's definitely something with the authentication and setup process when you're setting up a new Mac that isn't working right now, and add it to the other things that aren't working right now.
Yeah, Ali mentions it in one of her posts that's going up today, but we'll keep looking into it. Hopefully that gets fixed with 8.1.1. And do you know how fast they usually push out updates to the base OS 10 system?
Well, the old adage is it'll ship when it's done. And I think that's probably true for 10.10.1 as well. 10.10.1 has been in developers' hands now for a week or two, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect it out real soon, but hopefully sometime in the next few weeks.
To quote a really wise man, I'll wait for the blue build. No rush.
Yeah, boy, this has just been kind of an icky release.
Well, let's go. I was going to save it for later, but let's actually before we do that, Serenity, we have changed the way that we handle the Twitters. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so in the past, iMore's Twitter account was basically just a full fire hose feed of our RSS system. So basically anything that we posted online, that would automatically get posted to our Twitter account with with a nice picture and the headline. But it can feel a little static, and it can feel a little bit like, all right, I'm subscribing to RSS on Twitter. That's strange. So we've decided to not necessarily throw that out the window, but put it into a different account, which is called iMore_firehose.
Love that name.
I know, the fire hose of all iMore content. But iMore itself, at iMore, is now going to be all editorially driven. So it's just going to be us, Rene, myself, Peter, Allie, talking about the stories that really interest us and that we think are vital for you to see. We're also going to be interacting a lot more on that Twitter account. If you notice, like if you replied to the iMore account sometime in the last 5 days, you've probably gotten a response from me or Rene regarding your query. So we're going to be in general a lot more active and personable. The iMore account is not just a robot. There are people behind it. Hi.
They're human. I like this in general because one of the things, and we explained this on a show a long time ago, is a while ago we split sort of Mobile Nations into newsroom and into editorial, and newsroom just posts all day, so it takes a lot of pressure off of us, and it also means that we can sort of do a little bit of this less is more thing, which I'm becoming a huge fan of.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really important for us to be able to differentiate also between, like, here's a story that, like, we've worked on for a couple of days that we really think deserves your attention and your eyeballs, versus, it's kind of hard to see from the outside in, like, okay, is this just a regular news story from the headline? Is this a story that I should really pay attention to? Some of Nick Arnott's pieces are a great example of that, where it's like Nick does these incredibly detailed security deep dives that are also very personable and easy to read for the average computer user, but the headlines on those, from the headline alone, you could be like, well, is that just a straight news story? Is that from Newsroom, or is that something that actually has new content that I might want to pay a little bit extra attention to?
Yeah, no, I think that's really true. And one of the things, I'm blanking on my own sentence mid-sentence. Man, I'm blaming the lack of sunlight on this. One of the things that I think is equally awesome about it is you do get, what's the right way to say this? You do get that sort of personal touch, but it also means that if you look at Twitter and you're subscribed to 5 or 6 Apple sites, I've never wanted iMore to just have the same stories. Like I don't like it if, like, I'm subscribed to 5 Twitter accounts and all of them are exactly the same story. And I like the fact that this highlights the stuff that we're doing differently, that we're doing uniquely, and that we're doing sort of off the beaten path. It gives someone something different to read or look at.
And remember, we do have the Firehose account if you just want, everything.
All the things. Yeah, so you can go at iMore is a curated feed. At iMore_firehose is literally the fire hose. You can try and stand in front of it, but it will most likely knock you down.
Yeah. So many articles.
Kind of like the zombies in The Walking Dead this week.
Yeah. There was a giant herd of zombies. I did not watch this show, but my gentleman friend was like, "Oh yes, so there were a lot of zombies on there."
So many. Any plants?
No.
Okay. So, Peter, yeah, I had this later in the list, but you had a rant this week about the difference between, not sacrificing stability for the sake of innovation.
Yeah, that's a good way to summarize it, Rene. I am obviously an early adopter. We all are here at iMore, because we have to be, because we want to be able to talk about this stuff intelligently to you folks, the listeners and the readers. And, I fully recognize that Apple is really kind of on the bleeding edge of innovation here when it comes out with new things like iOS 8 and Yosemite, and also times those releases to come out with new hardware. iOS 8 dropped at the same time as the new iPhones did, and I think that Apple really had its hands full between the two of them to come up with a stable release that did what it wanted to, and also introduce new features like Apple Pay, which came out with iOS 8.1 and is, of course, specific to the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. And then Yosemite with its handoff features, very cool stuff. That also required the 8.1 update on the iOS side to really get working right. But, none of these things work perfectly. And it occurs to me that it's been a while since we've seen from Apple a really stable release of its operating system software, either on the iOS side or on the OS X side, that works the way that Apple says that it'll work from the get-go. And look, I'm not naive. I've been using Macs since there were Macs practically. I got my first Mac in 1985, and I've seen the Mac operating system, for example, go through a number of different iterations. And I understand that the operating system software is very complex, occupies millions of lines of code, and that you can't beta test for every conceivable configuration and every conceivable use that people have. But it just occurs to me that there has been a lot more grumbling over the course of the past couple of years as iOS 7 came out and iOS 8 came out, and Mavericks came out, and Yosemite came out, about stuff not working right, and not working up to people's expectations, and not, for that matter, working up to the promises that Apple has spelled out. We here at iMore have seen a lot of these problems too, and we felt it. In our own editorial chat area, I've had numerous conversations with Ren and with Ali and with Rene about basic stuff not working right. Like one of the things that I ranted about in my editorial this week was AirDrop. AirDrop used to work perfectly Mac to Mac, and now I can only get it working inconsistently between Macs in my house that were working perfectly with it under Mavericks. And, AirDrop is supposed to work great between iOS and Yosemite, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. I'm just getting really worried that Apple has really kind of painted itself into a corner here with this annual upgrade cycle that seems more or less tied to the release of new hardware, rather than focusing on making a stable operating system and creating a great user experience right from the get-go, instead of promising users new features that they eventually deliver after a lot of us have gone through the pain of early adoption.
I don't know. There's that once a year update schedule. I don't know. Again, I think you said this in your editorial. I don't think it's the once a year thing. I think it's not how many bytes they're taking, but maybe the size of the byte they're trying to take each time.
Okay, yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, if they were putting this stuff out iteratively, I think that might even be improved.
It's so hard because there's a duality. People do not like change, and people do not want to be bored. And it is so hard to walk the line between those two things. Because if you do too little, then you're falling behind. If you do too much, then you're biting off more than you can chew. And it's a really hard line to walk. And this year, I think particularly not maybe bad is the wrong word, but it's particularly hard because of things like continuity, because for the first time Apple really is merging not the operating systems, but a lot of the infrastructure between them. They've got, one product manager is in charge of continuity and extensibility across both platforms. That was unheard of a few years ago. You'd have the iOS team almost running completely independently from the OS X team, and only specifically would they do cosmetic things, back to the Mac sort of matching. And I don't know if this is the new normal, Peter, or Serenity, maybe if it's turbulence as we get to a new normal.
I hope, Rene, that it is the latter as opposed to the former, because I don't think that this is sustainable. I don't think that Apple can continue to have this sort of release schedule year after year and keep surprising us with stuff that isn't working right, and then getting around to fixing it on the back end. And, I cherry-picked an example from Yosemite just now, but Mavericks, Mail in Mavericks was a mess until 10.94. And it took until 10.94 came out in June of this year before things really started to settle down and stabilize. And Mail in Yosemite, if you're on an Exchange server, is having problems too. This is 101 stuff. And Craig Federighi at WWDC told us that things were going to be better, that they were going back to basics with stuff like Mail in Yosemite. And that's partly true. It was a little bit better, but not in all cases. There's still some ugliness out there. I don't want to make it sound like I'm just complaining for the sake of complaining either. I recognize that Apple, like I said before, has its work cut out for it, that it is really innovating in very cool ways that we are seeing for the first time. And I certainly enjoy the fruits of that labor. I made 2 calls on my Mac this morning for my iPhone. That's great stuff. I love it when that stuff works. I just wish that the experience was a little more consistent. What about you, Ron?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. My beef for a long time has been while I'm appreciating all of the innovation that Apple has done, and I love the directions in which they're going. For continuity to really sort of take a stand and become the gold standard for what interoperability between mobile devices and desktops should look like, it needs to work. And for it to work, the iOS and Mac teams need to have enough off their plate so that they can focus on making a consistent, strong experience. And some parts of continuity work really well. Some parts, like iCloud Drive, are still kind of way up in the air, or iCloud Photo Library are in beta. And it feels like Apple right now is trying to tackle too much, and in trying to tackle too much, they're letting things fall by the wayside. They've been kind of trying to like plug up the dam, so to speak, by hiring a lot of people and hoping that like their new hires will kind of keep the waves at bay from like crashing and flooding all of their projects. But I mean, like I don't think that a yearly release schedule is necessarily the problem. I just think Apple has so many great ideas and they're trying to do all of them, and maybe funneling that down a little bit might make things a little bit better.
Just a Guy English has elaborated on this previously, but it's worth bringing up again. Even when they have a yearly update process, it's not really yearly. So they'll, for example, iOS 7 ships. You have some people who have to work on bug fixes because there are bugs. You have other people who are already presenting, marketing pushes down feature requests and engineering pushes up feature requests. And at some point, Craig Federighi has to go through all that and determine which features they're actually going to go with. And when it gets approved, they have to go. They've got to work on new stuff. And they've got to get that ready in time to show off for the beta at WWDC. So they have, when you count bug fixes and release and everything else and testing, they have maybe 9 months to work on this stuff. And everyone keeps saying Snow Leopard, like we should have a Snow Leopard moment. Snow Leopard was sort of, you can listen, I forget which show it was on, but Melton described the Snow Leopard thing at some point. That was sort of a really smart way of explaining, I think it was Bertrand Serlet who pitched that, who said to Steve Jobs, we've really got to stop for a minute and shore up this entire foundation before we can go forwards again. And they came up with a great way to sell that. Because a lot of people would say no new features, that's horrible. But that sort of thing, if you could work that into the cycle where maybe you have iOS 7 is the huge interface improvement, iOS 8 is the huge functionality improvement, then iOS 9 just snow leopards all that and makes it rock solid and ready to go for the next sort of update cycle, then those three things maybe can work in harmony.
That would certainly be nice. I would not mind having a year off from having to rip my Mac and my iOS devices apart and put them back together again the right way. Part of the problem here, from my perspective, at least on the Mac side, is that Apple has made a lot of the problems that people have had with Yosemite can be fixed if they do a clean install. But doing a clean install has become more and more of a traumatic procedure. In recent iOS updates, it's no longer a one-click process to do a clean install. You really have to work at it. You have to create a bootable USB a bootable volume to run your Yosemite update on. Then you have to restore your data and so on. It's no longer as easy a process as it once was, and that's something that's just a pet peeve of mine, I guess, more than anything.
Yeah.
We take a quick break so I can tell you about PEMDAS, the advanced yet easy-to-use scientific calculator for iOS. PEMDAS is not like most other calculators. The goal of PEMDAS is to let you efficiently work with equations, calculated results, and variables, all in a clean, well-designed interface. PEMDAS for iOS is based on the PEMDAS dashboard widget, which not only was an Apple staff pick multiple times, but received the coveted Apple Design Award, one of the only calculators ever to do so. What sets PEMDAS apart? Most other calculators are not designed well. They either have poor aesthetics, interface that's too complicated or limited, or they borrow too much from the design of physical calculators. PEMDAS has a better balance. You type an equation, tap the equals button, and it calculates the result. It's easy to use the result in any subsequent equation or format it so it's easier to read. PEMDAS is a single upfront purchase of $5. Get it today. Just search the App Store for PEMDAS. That's spelled PEMDAS, or go to donkeyengineering.com. Once again, that's PEMDAS, PEMDAS, or go to donkeyengineering.com. Thank you, PEMDAS. All right, so yeah, we will cross our fingers. We will, I don't know, perform not any sort of anthropomancy to try and get this addressed. But it is interesting, and it's funny to see Apple versus Google versus Microsoft versus the other big companies these days, because something else really interesting happened last week. Microsoft made Office, not only released finally good versions of Office for the iPhone, which had been a long time coming, but they made them free. Before, you could just view them, but you couldn't edit them unless you had an Office 365 subscription. Now you can do minor editing for free as well. Ren, I don't know if this is too little too late, or if this is a finally, underscore sort of moment, but it really is a sea change for Microsoft.
Well, yeah, it really. See, I'm not sure how to take this. On one hand, you could view this as Microsoft is concerned about losing share to Pages, Numbers, etc. Finally, on the iOS platform, because Pages and Numbers, etc. are built in rock solid, and they can open Word docs and they can export Word docs, despite the fact that they may not have all of the features of the Office suite. But there's also the other hand, which is Microsoft wasn't making enough on cloud subscriptions, or wasn't actually fueling people to use the software, and they've gone the route of many other apps in terms of embracing the freemium model. And I would prefer to believe that it was Microsoft being concerned about Apple's, domination of the ecosystem, and not Microsoft being like, we give up, all apps are freemium, because, that doesn't say very good things for our Apple ecosystem in general, as we've talked about before. But I don't know. Like, I do think it's a win for users, because it means that the Office apps are all of a sudden a lot easier to work with, and the fact that Dropbox is built in is almost like a mea culpa from Microsoft being like, all right, you guys are exporting to Dropbox anyway, we might as well sign a deal with them, and also maybe you'll use our cloud subscription, but we give up.
There's this thing in mixed martial arts, and it's a horrible metaphor, but I'm going to make it anyway, where you're getting pummeled, and you either just cover up to protect yourself, or you cover up, fall down, and go for a double leg takedown. One is just pure defensive, and one is defense on the way to offense. And that's where I don't know here. I don't know if this is Microsoft, again, capitulating on Dropbox, saying OneDrive is just not enough for everybody. They need Dropbox. Capitulating on the idea that you can sell software for money, something Bill Gates pioneered. You're stealing my software. I mean, that was him. That was their whole thing. They figured out how to make money on software.
Yeah.
And they could be stumbling back and just on the way to falling down, or they could be stumbling back on the way to regroup. And I can't tell which one it is.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I think time will give us a little bit more of an indication. But I mean, you said for users, this is a great thing, especially if you needed to use Office in the past, and being able to have it on the iPhone is awesome. And the fact that I think iPad users are being able to get refunds if they were buying a subscription solely for the editing. Like, that's a pretty large step from Microsoft.
And now when Georgia sends me those horrible Word documents that she sends me, I can actually open them and not just scream in the darkness.
I tell you what, as somebody who sells iPads on the weekends, I am thrilled about this, because up until now, for the longest time, when customers asked me, can I run Microsoft Office on this, I would have to tell them no. And then after that, it was, well, yes, but here's the deal. You can download Office for free and you can read documents, but if you want to write documents, then you have to subscribe to Office. So it became a whole thing. And yeah, I could tell them about Pages and Keynote and Numbers, but at that point their eyes were glazing over anyway. Now I can just say yes and just leave it there. So from my perspective, I'm happy, and I'm sure that Apple's happier that Office is available on the iPad unencumbered as well. So on balance, I think it's a good thing. I'm not really in a big hurry to download it and use it, though, because I kind of left Office behind a few years ago.
But you've been dabbling in Windows Phone a little bit, Peter, and one of the interesting things here is I think there's still I still don't think there's a touch version of Office available for Microsoft's own platforms, which again seems like a giant concession to me. Yeah,
you're right. I have been, to sort of come out of the closet a little bit. I have been playing around with Windows Phone a little bit, and it's a lot of fun. And look, Microsoft understands the importance of of its own applications within not just its own ecosystem, but everybody's ecosystem. But Satya Nadella has said some very interesting things recently about where he sees Microsoft's role in the global computer ecosystem compared to Google and compared to Apple. And I thought it was really interesting. You know, his perspective is that Microsoft is much more of an infrastructure company than a solutions provider. They're the company that makes the products that help everybody else make their stuff, you know, as opposed to, you know, Apple doing its thing and Google doing its thing. It's an interesting take, and it'll be interesting to see how that gets reflected in new products and new product marketing strategies for Microsoft going forward.
Can we read into Office for Mac? I mean, we've seen now Outlook leaked. I thought it was a Halloween costume that it was wearing, but turns out no, that's the actual interface. But presumably there's a new version of Office for Mac coming. Do you think it might be similar?
You know, I don't know. Wouldn't that be fantastic if it were, though? I don't think so. I think that my best bet at this point is that Microsoft Office for the Mac is going to, because right now you can still buy a regular off-the-shelf copy of Microsoft Office for Mac 2011, install it and be done with it. If you want, you can subscribe to Office 365 and you can get I think you can install it on up to 5 Macs at a time, or up to 5 computers at a time, and you can do it with the Mac version as well. But the Mac version is still this older version that isn't quite on parity with its Windows counterpart. I would love to see Microsoft go to sort of a creative cloud model like Adobe has done, and keep the Mac version in virtual lockstep with its Windows counterpart. And if they need to make it, you know, a subscription-only thing, then so be it. It's an important app. It's going to remain an important app for so many people, especially in enterprise environments, you know, in corporate environments, and you know, it's the Office suite that a lot of people feel more comfortable working with from home too. You know, Microsoft Office is always going to be an easier sell to people, I think, who are new to the Mac platform or have been using computers for a while, than getting them to use Pages, Numbers, and Keynote. That's always going to be an uphill battle to get people to use stuff that they're not familiar with.
That's interesting, because I don't know if you saw them, Ren, but I saw earlier this morning the technologies numbers for enterprise adoption. And thanks to the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus and the new iPads, Apple is gaining market share in enterprise. I think they're over 2/3 for the iPhone and 3/4 for the iPad. And stuff like this is not going to slow that down.
Yeah, no, I heard that as well. And I mean, when you think about IBM's deal for enterprise apps as well, it makes sense. I mean, Apple's making a huge push towards the enterprise market, and being able to say, yes, we have these major companies developing these major applications, and also we have the hottest and greatest smartphone that you can buy and run all of your programs. Like, it's a good double whammy.
So many of the whammies.
Yep, all of the whammies.
So we had a bit of a time last week talking. Actually, I'm going to take a quick break because I always forget to do this. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to talk about one of our sponsors, and that is Smile Software. Smile is just an awesome company in general. They make a lot of apps that I use, like PDF Pen and TextExpander on the Mac. Today I want to talk to you about TextExpander Touch, though. That's the one that runs on iOS. And it used to be a good app. You know, I use TextExpander all the time, and it was a way to bring everything from the Mac to my iPhone and iPad, but it was limited because iOS was limited. But now iOS has gone and made extensions, extensibility, and one of those extensions is the custom keyboard extension. And wow, but Smile has been all over that. So they've got the new version of TextExpander Touch, and it lets you bring all of those shortcuts. If you're not familiar with TextExpander, basically it lets you create little snippets that when you type them in, they make this awesome blurt sound, and then suddenly you have reams of text, however much text you want. We use it a lot on iMore, for example, to enter links we use frequently. I've used it to live blog because, you know, just for names and for whole, you know, sometimes boilerplate that we know they're going to say over and over again. Sometimes just to put in structures for entire articles, because you know that it's a certain sort of an article that you need to fill things in on, and you can just get all the framework, all the code in there instantaneously, and it's just terrific. But getting it onto iOS was a struggle. No longer. Now, whether it's a simple email signature or several paragraphs of a standard response, all you have to do is bring up the TextExpander keyboard. You literally download the TextExpander app. You go into, and again, this is iOS. Smile's making this as easy as possible. With iOS, you go into settings, general, keyboards, add new custom keyboard. You enable it. Then you switch to this keyboard, and all of your text snippets are just right there. It's also built into a bunch of apps, including Byword, Day One, Drafts, Fantastica, Launch Center Pro, OmniFocus. It'll work anywhere with those, but it'll work in those apps specifically. But with the new keyboard, it will work in any app. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to try it. Peter, I know you've used TextExpander in the past.
Love TextExpander. Very, very useful utility.
And the new custom keyboard, I've used a lot of them. TextExpander is the only one I still have installed because it's the only one that does something beyond what a normal keyboard does. I do like the emoji keyboards, do not get me wrong. The animated GIF keyboard's also fun. But I can type with the regular iOS keyboard. What I can't do is expand text with it, at least not in a way that keeps it synced between my Mac and my iPhone and my iPad the way that I want it synced. I can do that all with TextExpander Touch. So here are the talking points. You got a custom keyboard. It makes your snippets available everywhere. You can expand your abbreviations in Mail, Safari, Messages. That's huge because previously, unless an app added it, TextExpander had no way to get into it, and Apple was not adding it to the built-in apps. Now it's in a keyboard. It's everywhere. You can sync your snippets with TextExpander in OS 10, and you can also do it with other iOS devices in Dropbox. It saves you time in typing. It respects your privacy because all this stuff is just there for your benefit. They're not doing any weird sort of harvesting on the cloud. And it now supports 14 languages as well as Kurz with a Z and Azerty. So if those are your jam, you can do them. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to smilesoftware.com/iMore. You can find out all about them. You can let them know that you heard about them from us, and then you can just go to the App Store. The more important thing, letting them know that you heard about them from us is nice, but the important thing is just going there and downloading it. Ren, this has saved me years and years of typing experience.
I love TextExpander. I only started using it relatively recently, but it's so helpful, especially I have all kinds of little snippets I use for emails, for my roller derby committee work. I have a whole bunch of phrases, rules I need to remember. I can just hit a keyboard shortcut and boom, it's all there.
And I don't want to get all Merlin man about it, but you can even do things where it'll insert the clipboard. It'll move your cursor to some other place. So for the podcast structure is always the same. So I just highlight the episode description. I type P review or P debug or P iMore or something, and it just blurts it entirely out there with the description embedded because that's what was in the clipboard. The entire post setup, I just have to add the numbers and everything else, and it just works. Saves me tons of typing, tons of cut and pasting. It is the closest thing you can get to magic in a custom keyboard. So once again, smilesoftware.com/iMore, and I want to thank them for their support. All right, Peter, Serenity, did you guys hear a bunch of websites declared that the age of Mac malware is upon us, that Apple is no longer invulnerable?
Heavens to Betsy.
Okay, I was talking to my father-in-law about this. And my father-in-law is a very smart guy, but he's not really the most up on technology. So all he heard was that the Mac and the iPhone got hacked last week, and it happened in China, and that's all he knew.
I cannot state enough. If you are running a website and you put up headlines like that, I really do not like you because you're the reason I get a lot of panicked, scared email from people who don't deserve to be panicked or scared. These are people who deserve to be informed. They deserve to be empowered. They do not deserve to be made to feel, stressed and confused just so that people will click on the links that you give them. That is not right. Stop that. Your keyboard should be taken away. In both of these cases, the situations are interesting, but the reporting was horrible. And I'll stop ranting about that and get situations. So the one that was with WireLurker was interesting in that this was trying to attack iOS through the Mac. It was mostly affecting, actually it was only affecting people who went to pirated apps, Pirate App Store. They would make a fake version of a really popular app, and when you downloaded it, it would install malware on your Mac. And because people are downloading pirated apps, they are more likely to put in their password and do the things you need, the hoops you need to jump through to actually install malware on apps because they thought they were getting something for nothing. Then once it was installed, it would wait for you to try to connect an iOS device over USB, and then it would try to push an enterprise application onto your iPhone. If your iPhone was jailbroken, it could just start taking everything because, when you jailbreak, you remove literally the root jail around your phone. If you weren't jailbroken, though, it would still try to pull out whatever it could. And again, it would only affect you if you were going to this one store in China that had pirated apps available. If you installed them on your Mac, if you then if you put in your password, installed them on your Mac, then connected your iOS device, you get a pop-up saying, do you want to trust the certificate? If you then said yes, so basically if you did everything possible to get yourself infected, it would infect you.
You know, my take on this is that if you lie down with dogs, you're going to wake up with fleas. If you are going to a pirate site to download pirated software, and if you are jailbreaking your Mac, or jailbreaking your iPhone with the intention of installing illicitly obtained software, you deserve what happens to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to say that too. There are situations in some countries where I don't know. Maybe it's a cultural thing. I don't know. There were some countries for a while, for example, where you couldn't get games, and so they would all pirate games because you couldn't get games in that country. So I'm hesitant to paint them with too bright a brush, but I think that's absolutely right. You know where you're going, and historically, wares have been used to attack people. It should be a known thing by now.
Yeah.
The bottom line, though, is that Apple has taken a number of good steps to protect people who do play by the rules. You know, Gatekeeper on the Mac will keep you from installing software that isn't signed with a certificate that lets your computer know that they're a legitimate developer. And in some cases, depending on how your Mac is set up, it may only be able to run software, depending on how you set it up, that's downloaded from the Mac App Store, so you know it's safe. And likewise, if you don't jailbreak your phone, the only software that's going to end up on that phone is software that's been put up on the App Store and has therefore been vetted through Apple's own process to make sure that it's legit and that it's okay and that it's not going to screw your phone up or steal your data.
Yeah, there is one exception to that, and that's what is being used now to attack, and that's the enterprise distribution, which was created so that companies can make their own custom apps and deploy them on their workforce's iPhones. And those enterprise certificates are now being used, and there was a new one today. It was actually reported back in July where they would say like new Flappy Bird, and then when you downloaded it, as long as you approved the enterprise certificate, it would install itself on top of another app and basically take over that app's cache and make you think that you were running that app. And that, again, is a problem. Most people should not be downloading enterprise apps, should not be approving them. But if they're disguised as something, covetous, maybe they will. To Apple's credit, when they find out, they pull the certificate so they can actually stop those apps from running because they invalidate the credentials that they're using to run with. There's another one on the Mac called RootPipe where it allows user escalation. If you're running an administrator, it can put you into root mode. And then if they have remote access or if they have physical access to your computer, they can get in and do sort of malicious things with it. Though if someone has physical access to your Mac, you probably have problems enough already. But just again to say that these stories are being written in a way that seems intentionally designed to make people afraid, and that's not okay. So I would like those sites to stop it.
Yes, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being aware that these vulnerabilities are out there, but the phrasing has gotta the fear mongering, guys. We're in it to help users, not scare them. We're not selling them security software.
Yeah. I don't know, Ren. Makes me sad. Makes me sad for the internet.
Word.
When my mom asks me, I go visit my mom because she needs help with something, and she's like, I saw in the paper that your iPhones are being attacked. And it's not okay.
I still get questions from people who are like, oh, you got the new iPhone 6? Does that bend?
Yeah.
The way that my father-in-law phrased it was really interesting. He said, Peter, I'm confused about this. I read this one thing that said that the iPhone got hacked in China, and then another thing that said that the NSA doesn't want anybody to use iPhones because they're unhackable. So which is it?
The FBI, yeah, too. That was I forget the quote there, but they're saying prosecution is still happening even with unhackable iPhones. So just don't download any Flappy Birds apps from the FBI website.
There we go.
Not a good idea.
All right, continuity. We've got our continuity guide up there. Ali did a great job putting together a bunch of continuity stuff. Peter did a bunch of Mac stuff. Ren is going to be loading it up with a bunch of videos to help us even more. But I was curious, how's continuity been working for you, Ren?
It finally is working great for all of my devices. That said, I find myself using it a lot less than I expected to. Like I see the little thing pop up in my dock, and I'm like, oh, Safari, that's nice. I don't need you right now. It's not necessarily a distraction, but it's one of those things where, like, I'm obsessed about like the little bubbles that pop up where it's like, oh, unread notifications. So every time I see something pop up in my dock, I'm like, what am I missing? What's going on? That said, I have used it. I love AirDrop, as I said in my video that I made a couple weeks ago. And I am finding the Safari handoff really, really useful when I'm especially in the morning, because I'll start sort of my work day sitting on my couch with like my iPad, and I'll like pull up a bunch of things. And then when I transition to my desktop, it's really easy to kind of send web pages over to the Mac. Oh man, I just did a flicking gesture, and now I really want that to be a thing. Click up to send to your Mac. But yeah, I like some of the basics I've found. I haven't used phone dialing on my Mac at all. Namely, well, I used it once when I was testing, and the audio quality was so painful that I just didn't do it again. But other than that, I'm pro continuity. I'm glad that it's more or less working.
What about you, Peter?
I'm using it quite a bit, and I'm running into a few problems hither and yon. Instant Hotspot was a real terror for me to get working. I actually had to rename my iPhone before it would do anything, and then I just named it back, and it was fine. So I have no idea what was going on there. But I've run into a few speed bumps here and there, but on balance, I find the new functionality very useful. Probably the one thing that I'm using more than anything else, oddly, and you millennials who never call anybody on your phones are not going to understand this, but I use continuity calling on my Mac almost every day. And that's mainly because I'm too lazy to get up off the couch or out of the office chair wherever I am, and I just want to get the call over with and get it done. So I end up using that. And the one thing that I don't like about it, though, is that FaceTime, speaking, Ren, of reminders that or notifications that pop up, FaceTime has this very nasty habit of populating itself with reminders about calls that you've missed, even if they're not calls that you've actually missed, but they're just calls that have popped up on the iPad or the Mac or whatever that you haven't answered on that particular device. So in some cases, I've answered the calls from my phone itself, and then I had to, open up my Mac or my iPad, and I find that little notification badge showing me the 2 or 3 calls that I've missed. That's very irritating. I hope that that's something that Apple will fix further down the road.
It's been like that forever. I've been using some of the features a lot. Like the hotspot, the personal hotspot was always painful for me. I'd have to turn it off, turn it back on, turn it off, turn it back on. And I ended up just using it over USB because I found the Wi-Fi version just not consistent enough. And the USB one always worked, but the minute I had to have a USB cable with me, it meant I was pulling power from my laptop if I wasn't plugged in. It was just not what I wanted it to be. Instant hotspot, I always rename my iPhones anyway, so I don't know if I would have had the bug if I didn't, but I name them as soon as I get them anyway. It just works fantastically. I went to the coffee shop the other day, pulled out my MacBook Air, and both my iPad and iPhone popped up in there. And my iPad had been in my bag for a couple of days. Previously, it would have been completely shut down in terms of a hotspot. But this, I just pressed the button, and 10 seconds later, I was connected to the internet and going. And the battery life is still phenomenal. It does mean that I can only connect with my own devices, but 99% of the time, that's all I want to do anyway. So that's been terrific. AirDrop, I've used a few times. I mostly just have everything syncing anyway, like PhotoStream or iCloud Photo Library, whatever it is now. It just syncs all the pictures. I have pictures to myself. But when I'm out with friends and I want to send something, I remember the first time they announced it, I was on a plane with Martin Reich, our friend Safe Solvent, and we airdropped photos back and forth on the plane. It was just ridiculous, and it's still working just the same. Handoff, I haven't used often. I've used it a couple times, and it's taken a while. Like I remember I was pulling up an email message. It took about 30 seconds for the email message to show up, and I just got frustrated, so I started a new one in the meantime. But it eventually worked, and hopefully that will just improve over time. But I think this is great, and I think it's really interesting because you look like Google just wants you to log in from everything, whether it's an app or whether it's a website. Log into Google servers. There's your single source of the truth. There's your version of the doc or whatever it is. Just work on it. Microsoft wants to put the same interface everywhere, whether it's a phone or a tablet or a Windows PC, laptop, desktop. They just want that Windows 8, now Windows 10 interface everywhere, and whether it's suited for that environment or not. Apple's letting the iPhone be the iPhone, the iPad be the iPad, the Mac be the Mac, but it's letting us move our activities around between them as long as we're, as long as we're demonstrably us, like we're within range, we're on the same account. It just sort of, it's cliche, but it just sort of works. And I'm finding that endlessly intriguing, Ren. Like, I like that vision of the future.
Yeah, I've spoken a lot about the right device for the right place that Apple's kind of pushing into being here, and I'm really excited for what we'll be able to do. I think right now, because continuity, the only people who are like really using continuity and handoff are Apple's default apps like Mail, etc. We're not really seeing just how awesome it can be in theory. Like I really want to see some of the pro apps embracing this. I want to see Pixelmator pushing from iPad to Mac. I want to see iMovie. I want to see GarageBand projects wirelessly transferring. Like
iTunes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, I want to be able to pick up music where I left off. There used to be an app called Seamless that did this way back when, and I believe the kid who wrote it is now working for Apple, or was working for Apple at one point in time. But it's great, and I'm like, come on, let's do things like that. Let's improve the user experience. I realize this is just sort of 1.0. See, I'm contradicting myself because I'm like, Apple, you should not focus on so many things, and I'm like, I want the world. So it's a combination.
Forget the two towers. It's the twin tensions.
Yeah. Oh.
Do more, but do it better. Thank you. All right, Ren, you were going to tell people how to troll with AirDrop.
Well, more specifically, I wanted to bring up the ridiculousness of trolling with AirDrop. Someone, where's my article? So
it's
on
Josh,
Verge,
right? Josh from The Verge.
Josh from The Verge has been walking around trolling people on AirDrop by sending them pictures of space sloths, because there is a setting in regards to AirDrop that allows you to receive AirDrops from anyone. Just anyone at any time. So he's been going around sending people sloths, which I find hilarious. But also, it's one of those things that since you can send any file on AirDrop, I'm gonna post a little thing on like, here's how you can avoid being the recipient of a space sloth or like a zip file or a random app bundle, for instance. I don't think you can actually run app bundles if you get them sent directly via AirDrop. But still, the point remains that like Josh is sending people space sloths. Other people may not be so nice in their trolling.
Yeah, that's ripe for abuse right there.
Yeah. So there's a pretty simple way that you can turn that off in settings, which is good. And the easiest way to do it is just to go up to Control Center and tap contacts only, so that everyone can't see your little tiny bubble. Your poor innocent bubble.
Yeah,
Biased by space not sloths, slostonot.
Slostra. I met Josh for the first time at the iPhone event. He's awesome, and this is an amazing troll. But he is being a space sloth is not a very offensive thing to be trolled with, and you know that this will be abused way beyond poor innocent space sloths eventually.
Oh yeah, but as an office prank, guys, if you work in an office, this is awesome. This is almost as good as the OS 9 change the background picture to be a little alert that you can't stay on.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, and the thing is that sometimes people just go to everyone in AirDrop because they figure that's the only way to make it work. Because contacts only is a little bit complicated. Apple doesn't want us broadcasting our contacts to each other because that's not private, that's not secure. I really have no way of knowing what Serenity's version of a contact is compared to what my version of a contact is. So in order for that to work, you have to be logged into iCloud. And then what Apple does is it basically checks both of our iCloud contacts repositories, sees if there's a match, and then presents me with my version of the contact. So my version of the picture, so I recognize it. If Serenity has a different version of the picture, I may not even know who that is. So it shows me my version of the picture and the name that I have, so it's recognizable to me. But there is extra complexity that goes with that security and privacy. So I think a lot of people do just escalate to everyone and then forget about it and go out and then bam, space lock, right? Right on the screen. So if you can help defend against that, Serenity, more power to you. All right. Do we have? Oh yeah, I was going to ask Peter about this. Peter, Blizzard finally came clean with their next project.
Yes, indeed. Have you seen the video for the new game?
I have, and my eyeballs are still knocked slightly backwards in my skull.
Yeah, it's very cool. For many of us, Blizzard is the Warcraft company. They've made Warcraft games since time immemorial, and World of Warcraft has been their biggest claim to fame for nigh on the last decade now. They've unleashed a brand new IP, and StarCraft to a certain degree as well, but that's about it. They've unleashed a new IP at BlizzCon in the past few days, and it looks really cool. It's called Overwatch, and it's a team-based first-person shooter. If you played games like Team Fortress or Counter-Strike on Steam, you may have an inkling of what Overwatch is going to be like. But the look and feel of it is just so cool. It looks almost like a Disney movie or a Pixar movie come to life.
So any indication if we're going to get this on any of our Apple devices anytime soon?
Blizzard is very, very good. They are actually the best about making sure that their products are supported on the Mac and PC. All of their products to date have been available on the Mac and the PC at the same time. I have no reason to think that Overwatch is going to be any different in that respect.
Awesome. So I should start training for it now.
Absolutely. As far as iOS is concerned, we'll see. World of Warcraft obviously isn't available for iOS, but Hearthstone is. They're collectible card games. So definitely, if you're a Mac fan, though, I'm guessing that you're going to be able to get Overwatch.
And if you're not, you can run out right now and get a brand new Mac Mini just to play Overwatch on if you want to.
I'd probably look a little bit north of that, like maybe an iMac.
A brand new iMac, played in Retina.
Yeah, exactly. Or, a nice 15-inch MacBook Pro should do the trick, too.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're totally good excuse for it, too.
Absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, that's all you need.
All right, so that brings us to the end. Actually, I forgot. We do have a couple of questions. Let me just go back to those quickly.
Questions.
You have questions, we have answers.
We do. So Matt wants to know, won't Walmart inevitably have to support Apple Pay in the U.S.? Retailers are being required to support contactless payment. So it's a little bit of background to this. I forget if it was someone high up of an executive from Walmart was yelling at an executive from Visa during a public panel saying, that the rates that they want was exorbitant, and it sounded like Walmart would just never get on board with anything that was based on credit card companies. Is that fair, Ren?
Yes, and I mean, Walmart is being incredibly stubborn and, in my personal opinion, silly over this. I understand why they want to reduce, they want to find some way around the MasterCard and Visa strangleholds, which I understand. I mean, they make a lot of money, and they could make a lot more money if they manage to shave down those credit card fees. That said, the way they're going about this is very, donkey-headed. They're being very stubborn about it, and I don't know if they'll have to support it eventually. Contact panel, technically what's being required in the U.S. is chip and pin, not contactless, unless I'm mistaken. When granted, most chip and pin readers do have a contactless reader included, but they may go the way of the Rite Aid and CVS and just be like, oh yeah, we have contactless readers, but you can't use them. Sorry, we're turning them off. Unless there's regulatory intervention, which I'm not exactly a huge fan of, it's question mark whether or not they'll ever come around. If everybody starts using Apple Pay and their currency system or their alternative fails miserably, well, they might have to eat some humble pie and jump on board.
What makes it hard for me is that Apple Pay just works with NFC. I don't know if any of us were really expecting that, but as long as you have the NFC system, Apple Pay will work, which means to block, if you specifically want to block Apple Pay, you have to turn off NFC, which also turns off Google Wallet, also turns off like my credit cards, my bank card. Those all have the PayWave on it. I can tap my card to pay as well as my phone, and you're just disabling that entire swath of technology. I think Walmart would do that. I just don't think it behooves them long term to do it.
They can get away with it here in the U.S. because NFC technology is used so infrequently that they're really not affecting, a large percentage of their customers. It's different. It'd be a different story, I think, in Europe or Canada, where contactless payment systems have been in use for a while and customers are a lot more attuned to them. I think that the vendors who have shut them off right now figure, we can live without it. We're not really seeing a lot of traction there anyway. And then whatever. What we do know, though, is that Whole Foods has seen a nice uptick in Apple Pay payments. I think I read recently that 1% of the transactions that were done last month in Whole Foods markets were done with Apple Pay systems.
That was just South Pay too.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's in aggregate, it's not a lot of money for Apple, but it's a fair amount of currency for Whole Foods, and they're certainly happy with it. Now, Whole Foods is just one use case, and I like to make fun of Whole Foods because it just seems such a an Apple customer sort of thing to use.
The Venn diagram has a huge intersection.
They
right.
do.
Absolutely, but it's good to see that that it's being used, and I hope it's going to give the companies that have shut off their NFC systems pause and say, hey, wait a minute, is it really worth it for us to turn these transactions down because it's money that we're leaving off the table?
We want to pay you.
I have to say, I was a little worried. Like, I've been trying not to shop at Whole Foods so often because paycheck-wise, it's very painful. And then I discovered that my local grocery store has contactless payments that are turned on, so I can use my Apple Pay system at my Star Market, and it's totally fine. Which makes it a lot easier for me to be like, yeah, I'll just go grocery shopping with my phone. It's fine. I don't even have to go to Whole Foods. I don't have to spend $70 on groceries. I'm okay.
That's just for the peanut butter.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we got Brian wants to know, I'll throw this your way, Peter. He says he's got iTunes radio stations disappearing on him. He had one more vanish recently. It's very weird. Have you heard anything about this?
I have not. That's unsettling. I use iTunes Radio almost every day when I'm out in the car, and I have never had a station disappear. So I'm not sure what's going on there.
All right, Brian, if you're listening, just tweet us the name of the station and we'll look into it because we don't want, God forbid, Peter's jams disappear on him. He'll just be surly for a week.
Yeah,
I will. I'll have to go on a kaiju rampage someplace.
No, I'm not. I wouldn't be surprised actually if it was a very specific station, like an artist-related station, where there might be something to do with rights expiring, which is a lame thing. But as we saw with the Taylor Swift shenanigans last week, artists do occasionally like to pull their music.
Pulled her music from Spotify, right?
She pulled her music from streaming services. Yep.
I was concerned that it was actually InfoSec Taylor Swift at first, but it turned out to be the normal Taylor Swift, so I wasn't worried anymore. David wants to know, iCloud Drive doesn't sync across my devices, so I'm back to Dropbox. What's happening? Others seem to have the same problem too.
Oh, the problem is that iCloud Drive sucks.
Peter.
iCloud Drive is still in very early stages, and even though it doesn't have an official beta tag like iCloud Photo Library, I'm not surprised that it's being wonky. My suggestion would actually be to turn it off and turn it back on again.
Yeah, a friend of the show, Clayton Morris, and I were troubleshooting iCloud contacts over the weekend because we both had this problem where we'd enter a contact in on our phone and it didn't get synced. It just didn't even show up on iCloud.com. And I didn't figure out what was happening with mine. Mine just started working after a while. It just took a long time to sync. iCloud was missing from his like he was signed into iCloud, but under default accounts, iCloud was not an option. And once he rebooted, it showed back up and everything started working again. But it was one of those odd little things. So I always recommend DOS reboot if you have no other real idea how to troubleshoot it. A couple more. Tim wants to know, why does it seem like Apple Pay in iOS apps isn't going to catch on? Will Amazon or eBay ever accept it? So this is different than the in-store. This is when it's built into like the Target app. I think it's built into the Amazon app though now, isn't it? I believe so.
You know, I'm not sure. I can't remember if it's on.
Or no, it's the card. It's the Amazon card supports Apple Pay, but not the app.
Yeah. I think that the more unless Amazon has specific deals with the card retailers that prevent them from using Apple Pay, that is it's really no skin off their back. It's the same thing as having like a Google Wallet checkout button or a PayPal checkout button, where it allows you to pay by a different way. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Amazon implementing it, depending on how persnickety Jeff Bezos is being about supporting Apple software. But at the same time, I mean, Amazon supports a lot of things that Apple does. It makes iOS apps, and
yep.
it would make complete sense. Especially, this might be a way to get around Kindle requirements if you can buy.
Well, so some people were worried that people wouldn't support it because they didn't want Apple getting a 30% cut, but Apple has never taken 30% of physical goods. It's only electronic transactions. So if you buy a Kindle book, you'd have to give Apple 30%, but if you order a physical book to arrive at your house, you don't have to give Apple 30%. So if you implement Apple Pay online in the Target app or the Walmart app or whatever, there's no conflict there. It's just the same as using, like Serenity said, one click, or I forget what the other really quick transaction processor is, but yeah, absolutely.
Well, and the other thing to remember about Apple Pay is it's currently only available either in stores or via third-party apps. The second that Apple provides an API to allow it to websites, I think that's when we'll really see it explode.
All right, so Apple's own iOS apps don't use extensions and Today View widgets. I miss the classic weather widget, for example. As far as I know, that's just a design choice. They chose to remove the old weather widget and replace it with weather in your Today overview, sort of the text-based weather thing. It's not that they're not doing it. They're just doing it in a way that maybe you don't like, but they seem to like right now. They didn't do a calculator widget for iOS. They did do one for Yosemite because they didn't believe that calculator-style interactions were great in Today View, although James Thompson and pCalc clearly proved that to be sheer folly. Folly, I tell you. But I think they'll do the ones that make sense to them. I don't think they have any aversion to it, so to speak, specifically. At least that's my quick take on it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, so with that, I declare this version of the iMore show to be ended for good and for all. Peter Cohen, if people want to find you on the internet. So
you can find me at Flarg on all the things, and of course at imore.com.
What about you, Serenity?
I can be found at Settern, SETTRERN, on all of the things, and on iMore.com.
If Ali Kazmuha were not away on secret assignment, she would tell you that you can find her at iMuggle, and you can find me at Rene Ritchie for the iMore show. We're doing it a little bit late this week. We had some scheduling strife, but we've got it all organized now. But typically you can find us every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern for the live show. That's where you get to ask us questions like this and interact with us and tell us why we're wrong about all the things that you think that we are wrong about. If you missed the live show, you can find us all the time on YouTube. That's youtube.com/iMoreVideo, or the audio version on iTunes or RSS, and all the links are somewhere beneath where I'm talking right now. If you haven't lately, please do go to iTunes. Please leave a review. Please leave a rating. It helps encourage iTunes to feature us. It really, truly does. And they've been doing a great job of that lately, but they always need great new reasons to do it. So please do go leave a review, leave a rating, and we will be back this Thursday with yet another show. A really big show. Thanks, Ren. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Rene.